Good afternoon, I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. My name is Tom, I am a full-time composer, producer and musician living and working in Cardiff, and I thought that today I would give you an updated tour of my studio. So I'll be showing you around the space that I spend the vast majority of my time in, as well as discussing the bits of gear that I use, how and why I use them, as well as talking about the odd bit of equipment that I just couldn't live without. So let's get into it. This is my 2022 studio tour. Now, one thing I do want to say very quickly, because everyone says this before they do a studio tour, but that's because it's true, and that is that there is no correlation between the gear that you have and how good the music that you can create is. The only things that you need to make amazing music are a laptop and a pair of headphones. Everything else, all of this, it's just inspiration fodder and just bits of fun. Don't let any sort of lack of equipment that you have make you think that you're not capable of writing amazing music and producing amazing tracks. But also, don't use not having gear as an excuse to not create anything. Oh, I would write a track, but I haven't got the $5 microphones I need to record a piano, so I'm just not going to bother. Don't do that. Create, write, whatever your circumstances. Anyway, I will be showing all of this stuff in due course, but for now, the tour starts over there, where my guitars are. Now, I use guitar for a lot of the tracks that I write, whether that's for my own solo artistic releases or for the albums that I produce for music library companies. And I've been playing the guitar, albeit quite badly, since I was a kid, and so I decided when I was in my last year of university that one of the things that I wanted to get for my studio was a good quality guitar. Now, there'll probably be some guitar snobs that will say that I don't have a good quality guitar. I have a Mexican Telecaster. I got it in this lovely blue color. Now, guitar has never been a big priority instrument for me, but because I do like writing with it, and now I write with it all of the time, I knew back then that I always wanted to just have a guitar that was good enough to be used on recordings, that just a standard, simple, passable guitar that I could use on basically anything. And that's when I got this Fender Telecaster, and I've been using it ever since. I absolutely love it. I've probably recorded that guitar on over 200 tracks by this point, so I'm definitely getting a lot of mileage out of it. Now, the other guitar that I have is this old vintage acoustic guitar, vintage as in the brand, not as in old, although it is quite old. This is the only acoustic guitar that I own. It's missing a string. I very rarely play it, but it was a Christmas present to me from my parents when I was really young, and it does sound really nice to my ears if I can be bothered to change the strings on it. The only other guitar that I use occasionally is this Ibanez 4-string bass. It was basically the cheapest bass guitar that I could get in my local music shop, PMT, and I got it because I hate how bass guitars sound in sample libraries. I've never heard a convincing bass guitar in a sample library. There's always something about them that don't work for my ears, so I use a real bass and record straight into my interface. Now, I spent years and years using Guitar Rig Pro and just DIing my electric guitar, but after a few years of doing that, and as I started to write more and more with the guitar, I realized that I did actually need a proper amplifier, and so that's why I got this. This is my Vox AC15 amplifier. Beautiful amp. I absolutely love the sound of Vox amplifiers, and with the styles of music I usually find myself writing in, especially with guitar, there's a lot of kind of ambient post-rock stuff. I felt that the sound that the Vox amp had was perfect for that. And I effectively use this as a reamp system. So I'll record the guitar initially straight into the computer until I get the part right, and then I'll send it through the output of the interface into the amplifier to be picked up by the SM57 on the cabinet and then recorded back in. I also have a small and very basic selection of guitar pedals. I've got the Electro Harmonic Soul Food, an Ibanez Tube Screamer, and a Proco Rat. Now, these are basically just distortion boxes. I felt like these pedals would be the best at providing me with a really broad range of distortion sounds, so any sort of sound that I think I want, I can nearly always get it using some variation of these three pedals. I've also got these tiny reverb and delay units. Now, I don't ever record through them. The only reason I got them is because sometimes if I just want to sit down and play the guitar by myself in the evening, not recording or connected to the computer or anything, it's nice to be able to put a little bit of reverb and delay on things. But in general, space, reverb and delay is something I'll always put on in the box instead of through pedals, because I just hate the process of firstly just doing all of the ins and outs and rerouting things and then having to print it, and what if you change your mind later? It's a faff and it's a hassle, and sometimes it can work really well. I know that I do miss out on some things occasionally, but for my workflow, having to write a lot of music for library companies, I just don't have the time. So that's a quick rundown of my guitar setup and what I use it for. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is this. My piano, Casey, named after the iconic country music superstar Casey Musgraves. Now, my piano is a tiny little Zender 6-octave piano. I'm not a particularly accomplished pianist. Certainly, I don't play anything that requires me to have the additional octave at the top and the bottom of the piano. I play a lot of things in the same sort of register. In addition to that, I have got limited space, and I was really after a small piano that had character, as opposed to just buying myself, I don't know, like a brand new Yamaha upright. Not that they don't have character, but I can remember finding this and I loved the tone of it, and as you can see, I also put felt over the strings. I've experimented with various different fabrics, including linen and leather, and I've actually found that this fabric, which I think is just a giant piece of dishcloth, makes the piano sound the best for me and what I would use it for. I've got these two really convenient gooseneck mic arms on the side, which basically allow me to always have the microphones in a position where I can record easily without me needing to have permanently set up mic stands, which kind of look a bit clumsy and will get in the way of things. In terms of the microphones, I'm using a stereo pair of T-Bone somethings. They were super cheap, but I'm actually borrowing them from my friend Dav. I think he got them off Toman for 80 quid in 2014. So they're not good microphones, but my track Tide was recorded using those microphones, and I think it sounds quite nice. I only got this piano about 6 or 7 months ago, but it was one of the best decisions that I've ever made. As much as I love the wealth of amazing piano sample libraries that are out there now, there's something different loading up a sample library and playing it on a MIDI keyboard versus playing a real piano. And I know that that sounds like the kind of wanky nonsense that people say, but it is true. There's something inherently better about feeling the vibrations of the instrument itself. You play a key and it responds to you instantly. There's no latency, there's no lag, and you're not hearing the sound coming out of two speakers that are over here. You're hearing the sound come from the piano, from the soundboard. It's a really great feeling, and I would really encourage anyone who has a studio to get a piano, even if you never plan on actually recording it. Because the main thing that I found with it is I have been so much more inspired just by having a real piano. You know, none of the studio stuff needs to be on. It can be late at night, I can just sit down and start playing. And it's in those moments when you're waiting for the kettle to boil and you pop over to the piano for a quick tinkle that magic can happen, in my opinion. That you really have these ideas that just come out of nowhere, and then before you know it, you've got to reboil the kettle because you've been sat there for 2.5, 3 hours figuring out how to finish this piece. So let's take a look now at the main hub of my studio. For about 2 years, I've been using this Zower Vision W desk, which has been an absolute game changer for me. I love the fact that it's got an inbuilt cable tray. It really helps to tidy things up a bit, and I've got a fair amount of outboard gear, and having a desk that I could fit all of that in was really useful. So yeah, my desk is a Zower Vision W. I have no complaints to make about it whatsoever. Now, the master keyboard that I use is the Complete Control S88 from Native Instruments. I got this back in uni, and because I've been playing piano since I was a kid, I've always struggled to get the expression that I really wanted from just cheap MIDI controllers that I used to use. And this has got full-size weighted keys on a Fatar key bed, so it does the job amazingly well for me. I can remember when I first got it, suddenly I felt like I could competently put a piano part into a track, whereas before it was always something that I'd struggle to do. So yeah, I love this keyboard. I love its simplicity. I don't like MIDI controllers to have like hundreds and thousands of different things on there. I just want a good quality keyboard, modulation and pitch. Now, in terms of the outboard gear that I've got, and I am slightly ashamed to admit this, but a lot of the stuff that's in the desk itself I basically never use or very, very rarely use. I went through a period of time just after uni where I was scouring eBay for like random, odd, super cheap bits of gear that I could put in my rack, because I had one of those quick lock ones and I just wanted to fill it up because I thought it would look cool. So I've got this Korg DVR 2000 reverb unit, a Zoom RFX 1000, this colorful multi-effects unit, which is actually really cool. I do use that from time to time. It's all patched in and I do use some of it occasionally, and if I had the desire to, I could use it all, but it's quite rare for me to do so. The two bits of outboard gear I have that I do use more frequently are the Art Pro VLA2 dual channel valve compressor and the Lexicon MX300 reverb and effects unit. On the desk here you can see my monitor controller. Now I use the PreSonus Monitor Station V2, which I get on really well with. It allows me to switch between my two different monitors whenever I'm mixing, as well as being able to hit this button and throw everything into mono, which is incredibly useful when you're trying to mix something. It's a really good general bit of advice. When you're mixing, stick it in mono and see if anything disappears, and if it does, you'll know that you've got some phase issues there. Now, connected to my monitor controller, I have two sets of monitors. I have the PreSonus Eris E8s as well as the Alesis M1 Active 520s. Now, neither of these are monitors that would be considered super high tier or industry standard or anything like that. However, I really like them, and I know how they sound, and I think that that's so much more important than getting a super expensive set of monitors. If I bought a 20 grand pair of Barefoots, I wouldn't necessarily be making better mixes on them immediately. You know, you need to get to know them, and I know my speakers really well. The 520s were the first set of active monitors I ever owned. I bought them when I was 17, still in school. And the Eris E8s I got in my second year of uni. What I really liked about them then is that they're front ported, and when I was in uni I was moving house a lot, so I couldn't always put my monitors in a space where they were far enough away from the wall if they were rear ported, so then being front ported was super useful, and they've got a lot of parameters that you can control and change on the back of them. And another thing that I feel is worth mentioning about monitors, I've considered upgrading my monitors in the past, but the reality is that my room isn't treated, so there's not really that much point me getting a new fancier set of monitors until I'm working in a space that I can properly treat. And until that point comes, the speakers that I'm most familiar with, that I know the areas in which they are lacking or boosting frequencies, are the best ones for me to work on. In addition to my monitors, I use two sets of headphones. I have the Sennheiser HD215s. Now, these were bought for me as a Christmas present, I think, by my mum when I was 14 and only just started being interested in music production. So I've had them for years and years and years. And again, I just know what they sound like. I don't actually use these all that often, but they are good to have around, and they're good for recording as well because one of the ears can flip up. The other headphones that I do use all of the time for referencing my mixes on are the Bose QC35s. I used to work in the Bose shop in Cardiff like 4 years ago, and when I worked there you were allowed to take headphones home and try them out and have things on loan, and so I've spent years listening to music through those Bose headphones, and I know how my tracks should sound through them. Great pair of headphones, and the noise cancelling is genuinely brilliant. Now, the computer that I use is again pretty simple. I can't afford to be buying £50,000 Mac Pros, and I'm not editing 4K video and rendering huge films anyway, so I don't need to. I use an 8-core Intel Mac Mini with 64GB of RAM. It's very dusty, as you can see. On top of the computer I've got two different drives. One is a standard external hard drive, which I just use as a Time Machine backup, and the other one is an SSD drive that I store all of my sample libraries on. I also have this 4TB external hard drive that I've partitioned to be different things. 1TB is another backup, so I've got my Time Machine and I've got another backup on that drive. 1TB is an old projects folder, so everything that I finish goes straight into there. 1TB is for like old and random audio samples that I just gradually accumulate over time that I don't want to put onto my main sample library drive. And I think the other terabyte is free at the moment, but it's good to know that the space is there if I need it. There's a problem with computers is you're always running out of space. Following on from the computer, let's talk about all of this super fun stuff over here. It's no secret that I am a huge fan of synthesizers. I use them as often as I can, and recently I managed to pick up a few more, including some sort of dream and workhorse synthesizers that I've wanted for a long time now. So this is the synth station of my studio. Some of these instruments I use more than others, and some of them I use almost every day on every single track. But I love them all dearly and never get bored of playing around on them. So to start off, we've got the classic Korg MS-20 Mini. This I bought in university, and to be honest, I didn't really know what I was doing when I bought it. It's only in the last sort of 2 years that I've really started to appreciate synthesizers and what they can do and learn to program them properly. The MS-20 Mini is a wonderful instrument, and mine's very noisy. I think there's a lot of dust inside, but sometimes I like to record just the noise from it and overlay that on top of another patch from something else if it doesn't have that type of noise. And it's also really cool to route external audio through it. My latest track, Heraith, actually has this like piano sound at the beginning that is like kind of rhythmic, and that was something that I put through the filter of the MS-20. Next, I've got the Moog Sub 25. The reason that I got this is because I wanted to have at least one Moog synth that I could use for basses and leads whenever I needed to, because there is nothing quite like the sound of a Moog, and I just wanted to have that bit of kit that whenever I want a fat, deep, rich bass, or some nice plucky lead thing, or even some super aggressive lead, I've got a really good quality Moog synth to do it with. I do occasionally feel like I should have got the Grandmother instead though. Moving along from that, we have the Korg Minilog. I got this at the same time that I got my MS-20, both university purchases where I probably spent like my maintenance loan on synths and then ate nothing but lentils and rice for the rest of the term. Again, very, very good synth. I don't get on with this one as well as I do with some of the others. I think that its interface can be a bit overcomplicated, and I don't like things that have hidden parameters. I can remember finding it incredibly complicated to try and figure out when I first opened it, as opposed to the MS-20, which, even though it looks more intimidating as an instrument, is actually really easy because it's one knob per function and everything is written out in front of you. But that being said, I have spent hours and hours with the Minilog. I do really, really like it. It's just one of those things that it takes a bit more time to get to know. Moving across again, we've got my little Behringer rack thing here, which is a combination of the Behringer Wasp, the Behringer Model D, and the Behringer Cat. Now, these are all remakes of very famous synthesizers. I got the Model D when it first came out. There was a lot of hype around it. I mean, who wouldn't want to have the sound of a Moog for like 250 quid or whatever it cost? And it was really good. It is really good. I'm not one of these people that like trashes on Behringer. I think Behringer do some really, really good things and make some really, really good products. Or at least they make really good products. They might not do good things. I don't know. They are a giant conglomerate. But Behringer synths are actually pretty good. Certainly from my perspective, they sound amazing. And when someone is just getting into synthesis for the first time and they're unsure what their career will hold or if they're even going to be into it long term, sometimes they don't want to spend £4,000 on a synth, and being able to just pick up something that sounds pretty good and only costs 300 quid is useful. And that was certainly my attitude when I got the Model D, and I used it on loads of stuff. And now we come to the two main attractions, in my opinion, of the synth station: the Dave Smith Instruments Prophet Rev 2 and the Tom Oberheim and Dave Smith collaboration OB6. Both of these instruments are, in my opinion, absolutely beautiful, and I am so pleased that I purchased them. I bought these two synths for completely different reasons. When it comes to the Prophet Rev 2, I wanted a workhorse polyphonic synthesizer. I got the 16 voice version as opposed to the 8 because I do like working with really, really full, rich chords, and I don't want to worry about voice stealing. But I wanted to have one synth right next to me at all times, that whenever I want to do some synth stuff or add some synth to a track, I can just turn it on and play some music through it, and that will be that. And this has got like 4 LFOs. The modulation capabilities on the synth are just out of this world. So that is my workhorse synth. I am pleased to say that it's doing exactly what I wanted it to do. Since I've had it set up, I've used it on literally every single track that I've worked on. The only slight negative that I'll say about the Prophet Rev 2 is that I thought that the presets were kind of terrible. I can remember having a tiny twinge of like, oh, have I made a mistake here when I first got it, but a few days later, I decided to sit down for a few hours with just an initialized patch and create something. And I created this kind of cool pad. And also I didn't realize that there are websites where you can basically purchase user-made presets. So I've replaced one of the banks on there with some presets that are more to my taste and I find more inspiring, and I can tweak them. But it is a really, really great synthesizer. Now the OB6 I got for slightly different reasons. For one, I just love the sound of the OB6. The SEM filter in there and the distinct sounds that you get out of this synth is just amazing. I was in love with it from the second that I turned it on. There's just something truly magical about this synth. Like, you don't have to do much to make something sound amazing with it. Also, because it has a very distinctive sound to it, I want to try and incorporate that into my own music. I got the Prophet Rev 2 as a workhorse polysynth, but I got the OB6 as a style synth. That's the thing that I'm going to try and weave into lots and lots of music that I write from this point forward, and especially in the area of like ambient and neoclassical music that I primarily work in, at least with my artist releases. If I'd gone out and found like a Roland Juno 60 or something, then that would probably have been the most boring and predictable synth to use in that music. Junos are everywhere now, and they are great, but I wanted a synth that had a sound that I could play with and find some inspiration from, you know, and this synth is just absolutely beautiful. And one thing I will say about the synths as well, you can get smaller, cheaper module versions of both of those synths, so it doesn't have a keyboard, but you hook everything up through MIDI. And I didn't want to do that because I feel like with a synth like this, it's nice to treat it like a musical instrument. I mean, especially the OB6, you have to calibrate that thing every time you turn it on and then 15 minutes later. And you've got to sort of be careful with them in a way. And I feel like that's really good. It's really nice. And I don't want to just have like a very, very expensive box on my desktop. Just like the piano, I want to be able to sit down and just play and just see what happens and experiment. And that's what I think polysynths was really, really good for. Well, all synths, really. You should buy more synths. Moving on from the synthesizers, I should talk about how everything is rooted and connected. Now, my interface is a Focusrite Scala 18i20. I upgraded this quite recently from my Focusrite Sapphire Pro 40. It's a great interface. I really like it. I was tempted by the UAD stuff, but because of all of the mics I like having permanently set up and all of the instruments that I have, I didn't want to spend like as much money as it would have cost to get one of the big rack mountable UAD ones. So I just stuck with a Focusrite. I find them super clean and super easy to use. Above that, I've got my patch bay, which I use to obviously route things together. And then above that, I've got my Motu MIDI Express 128. Now, this is how I can control all of the synths if I want to from my computer. So the MIDI Express is connected to my computer via USB, and it has 8 outputs on the back. Each one is connected to a different synth. The MIDI Express 128 has been an absolute game changer for me, just being able to have all of my synths hooked up and ready to go. Lastly, I should probably talk about microphones. I have a small collection of very mediocre microphones, but I enjoy them all. So my mic cupboard consists of the following: a blue baby bottle, an AKG C3000B, a Behringer B1, a Shure SM58, a Shure SM57, a pair of T-Bone mics from Thomann. Oh, and this Shure Green Bullet harmonica microphone, which I genuinely love, and I use that all of the time. In fact, the vocals on the Deep Blue were all done with just that microphone. It's got such a cool sound to it. So that's it. That's what my studio is like these days. And I'm in a place where I feel incredibly lucky and very happy with what my studio is like. I can remember watching Christian Henson, and he said at one point that studios are fluid things. You don't get a studio to a point of completion. It's something that will constantly be adapting and changing with you and what you're doing in your career. Absolutely agree with that. This space will probably look completely different in a couple of years' time if I'm still in this location. But at the moment, I feel very content with my studio. Everything is in arm's reach. I have the instruments that I want, and it's a space I am incredibly fortunate to be able to work in every day. Oh, actually, I've just remembered, I also have my cello here. I used to play the cello growing up and through school, so I still have my cello, and I have an Irish low whistle and a didgeridoo, all of which I can actually semi-competently play. Oh, and this is the bonsai tree that I bought when I first moved into this flat, killed about 2 weeks later, and I then converted into a patch cable and cable hanger. Anyway, that is my 2022 studio tour. Thank you so much for watching, and if you are watching this and don't know anything about me, I work full-time primarily as a media composer, but I also produce my own artist music, which is in a sort of ambient neoclassical electronica style. And if you're interested in listening to any of that, there'll be links in the description to my music on all streaming platforms, and there'll also be links to my shop where you can pick up copies of either my debut EP Her or my debut album The Deep Blue on vinyl. Let me know any questions or queries that you have down in the comments section. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and if you haven't done so already, it'd be cool if you could subscribe. I'm going to be making a new video every week this year, and on that topic, if you have any ideas or things that you want to hear me talk about and want me to make videos on, if it's, you know, music related or gear related, plugins, all of that stuff, just let me know all of that down in the comment section, and follow me on Instagram if you want as well. Thank you so much for watching. I really do hope that you've enjoyed this. Have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll see you very soon.